Well, I hope everybody's excited to jump in and discover why anyone can and should automate with DriveWorks. Now, there are a number of challenges in today's environment, and some of the things that we're seeing really affect every single department within an organization. When it comes to engineering, what we're seeing is that a lot of engineers are overworked with custom orders, and this leads to long lead times and difficulty responding to sales inquiries. For the management team, we're seeing the great resignation, as it's being called. A lot of companies are experiencing staffing issues that make it difficult to offer custom products or allow their engineering department to focus on innovation. For the sales team, complex products can be difficult to quote, and they can often be expensive just because of the amount of time that's involved with engineering and manufacturing. On the customer side of things, what we're seeing is that customers they just want something special, right? They want a particular product, they want it their way, and sometimes they even fail to understand your complex products and details. And when it comes to data management, we know that a lot of companies have disconnected data silos and duplicate data throughout their organization, which can lead to a number of complex issues. All of these issues, at least in some way, can be solved by design automation. So when we talk about design automation, what do we mean? Well, when it comes to SolidWorks and DriveWorks, what we're really talking about is a simplified way for us to be able to specify information about a product, have some sort of automation tool run through calculations and perform a little bit of math, and then ultimately spit out all of the information that we need to be able to manufacture our products. So this could be things like SolidWorks documents, quotes, bills of material, all the data that you guys see downstream as you develop and manufacture products. What I'd like to do real quick is show you how this actually looks inside of DriveWorks. So when we're talking about DriveWorks design automation, I've got a really cool example here. It's fairly simple, but it's a cupboard that we have the ability to custom design kind of on the fly. So you'll see that we've got this interface where we can go in and we can specify the height, we can specify the width, the depth, kind of rotate our model around and get a nice perspective on what we're creating. And then we can proceed through a number of design choices such as material, the style of door that we're going to have, and then things like accessories, knobs, pull handles. And at the end, what we wind up with is essentially a deliverable for all of the information and documentation that we need. So I've got the ability here to have DriveWorks go in and quote this cabinet. It can take into account all of those parameters that I specified and then give me accurate pricing on the fly. It can also generate a bill of material that I can send out on the floor so we know what components we need to round up, as well as a cut list for all of the items that we're going to have to custom cut and manufacture. Of course, the big thing that this would also deliver is it would deliver all of the SolidWorks models. So if we had a little bit more time, I would basically hit generate and we could watch this thing kick out the 20 or so models that are required to actually build this cabinet. But in a nutshell, that's what design automation is. It's the ability to take all of these processes that really aren't terribly difficult for our engineering team or our designers, right? The ability to go in and modify these models to create a custom configuration. But we're reducing the amount of time that takes, greatly. We can take a process that was hours or even days down to minutes. In this case, it didn't take us long at all to go and configure this cabinet, and we could generate all of those documents and models in just a number of minutes. So design automation can solve a lot of today's challenges, and the big question that often comes to mind is, so if automation is so great, why wouldn't you automate? And the answer really isn't always that simple. First and foremost, automation can be intimidating. Traditionally, we've talked about, programming, having to know a programming language and develop your own applications in order to automate SolidWorks and some of your other processes. There's always kind of the fear of change. Companies are afraid to part with the way it's always been done. Sometimes companies are just unaware of what automation capabilities exist, right? You kind of get the blinders on, you're very focused on the task at hand, and you fail to just kind of stop and look around and see what possible solutions exist. And then finally, automation can be intimidating. And if you don't believe me, jump in a self-driving car, and the first time you take your hands off the wheels and let the car automate that whole driving process, it can be a little bit scary, right? So there's a number of things that can be a little bit intimidating or that companies often face, and it's not uncommon. So we've got a slightly different approach with DriveWorks that makes this a little bit different. So when we're approaching automation in the traditional sense, we're often thinking about programming and API. We're thinking about things like C# and Visual Basic and having to write and know all of these programming languages, which has a very steep learning curve. Okay? It also requires a lot of ongoing maintenance. As SOLIDWORKS updates their API, you're going to have to basically maintain this code or this custom application each year, probably have to do a little bit of troubleshooting or testing before you update. So that can get a little bit tedious. There's also a large initial investment, really without any ROI. If you don't have an experienced SOLIDWORKS API programmer on staff, they're going to have to learn the SOLIDWORKS API. They're going to have to kind of have a little bit of a trial and error period while they really get up to speed on programming. And it's also easy to paint yourself into a corner. When you're writing, your own programs, oftentimes the decisions you make today on the way your program functions can limit what flexibility or options you have tomorrow or a year from now or 2 years from now. And so we do see customers that create their own custom applications for SOLIDWORKS, but it's not uncommon for us to see them just take it into a corner where they don't really have a way out or any flexibility going forward. So how is DriveWorks any different? Well, when it comes to DriveWorks, we're really simplifying the automation process. And a big way that we do that is with rules and functions that are easy to learn, but still very powerful in their capabilities. And we'll actually take a look at that here in a minute. There's also very little maintenance required because SOLIDWORKS is a gold partner product with DriveWorks. And what that essentially means is that SOLIDWORKS and DriveWorks kind of check things out before they release their new versions to make sure that everything that worked last year is going to work next year. With DriveWorks, because it's a very easy tool to kind of get up and running, you get a quick return on your investment, and it's also very scalable as you grow. There are 3 different license types that allow you to kind of expand the DriveWorks capabilities as your needs continue to grow. And then lastly, flexible and modular projects. So DriveWorks has a number of different features and pieces of functionality that allow you to keep your projects very flexible. And that means that the decisions you make today don't necessarily limit what's possible tomorrow or down the road. We have the ability to really take advantage of all the new functionality that's being released in SOLIDWORKS and in DriveWorks for years to come. So DriveWorks really consists of 6 or 7 key pieces of technology. So we talked about the rule engine a little bit. There's also a form designer that makes it very easy to build out a graphical interface. There's a workflow that allows you to kind of track and structure this whole automation in coordination with your current design process. There's a configurable 3D and a browser functionality called DriveWorks Live, which means that all of this cool automation, and just like you saw there with the cupboard where we were able to go and configure in 3D our own custom size, that can actually be placed into a website so that it's customer facing or available from anywhere in the world. And then, of course, there are additional functionality pieces like integration with different databases and third-party systems and some troubleshooting tools like reports and auditing. Now, what I really want to focus on today is the rules engine, because I think when we talk about companies kind of being a little tentative to adopt any sort of automation, they really think that programming is just too much for them. It's not a headache that they want to take on, but the rules engine in DriveWorks really means that anybody can automate. And I'm a firm believer in this because I am not a programmer. I'm an engineer. I took 1 programming class in college. It was awful. I'm not even sure how I passed, to be honest with you. But DriveWorks really makes programming almost enjoyable in a way. And so we'll kind of see that here in a second when we run through and take a look at how some of the rules and basic functionality in DriveWorks operate. So we took a look at this cupboard earlier, and this cupboard is all built off of a SOLIDWORKS model. There's actually a SOLIDWORKS assembly that contains all of these pieces and parts. And when we look at the first steps of automation, what we've got to do is we've got to essentially capture or document all the little pieces inside of our model that we want to be able to change. So if I jump over here to SOLIDWORKS, I've actually got the same cupboard assembly. And we're going to take a look at how we could capture and essentially tell DriveWorks exactly what it is that we want to be able to automate. Looking at this top level assembly, I'm going to pick out just a couple of key items that I know we want to automate. So a big one might be something like the shelf quantity. As the height of this cupboard gets a little bit taller, we might need to add additional shelves. And so that's basically something that DriveWorks needs to be able to automate through rules. In order to make this happen, all I've got to do is go find whatever functionality in SOLIDWORKS controls the number of shelves and capture it. So I've actually got a pattern down here for the shelf. And if I double click on that, you'll see right out in the graphics interface, it actually shows the spacing and instance count for that pattern. And if I click on the instance count, over on the right-hand side in DriveWorks, it allows me to just capture this value and give it a name. So I might go in here and just give it something simple like shelf quantity and hit add. And you'll just see that it adds that shelf quantity value to this list of already captured dimensions. So you'll see that I've got some in here for height, right? We just selected the height dimension. We selected the width dimension, the depth dimension. And so I'm not really having to worry about any of the API or some of the very technical information that would kind of allow me to access this information in the background. I'm literally interacting with the SOLIDWORKS models that I'm familiar with, finding the parameters that we know we need to be able to change. I click on them, I give them a simple name, and I hit add, and that's essentially it. Okay, so in SOLIDWORKS, it's very easy to go in and pick out the different pieces that you want to automate. Now back on the DriveWorks side of things, what we're going to do is we're going to take those captured values and we're going to write rules that allow us to change those values. So maybe the current height of the cupboard in my actual SOLIDWORKS model was something like 400 millimeters. I'm going to figure out a way to write a rule that allows me to vary that value with DriveWorks. Now, in order to do this, I really need some sort of input. And we saw that I had some sliders I could kind of work around with, and you'll actually see that on the back end of this DriveWorks project here. It's very easy to create a graphical interface because you simply just grab these different form controls that you see up here on the toolbar and you place them onto your graphics area. So I just selected a couple sliders, placed them out here, and then I gave them names like slider height, slider width, slider depth. And this allows me to essentially input these custom values. Once I have captured the items in my SOLIDWORKS model that I want to be able to control, and then I've given myself a way to vary those values, essentially inputs to specify new values, I've got to find a way to connect the two. How do I take the value from height and drive it into the dimension for height in my model? Well, that all comes down to the rules engine in SOLIDWORKS. So right here, inside of DriveWorks, I'm going to go to Model Rules, and you'll see a list of all the different models that I've captured in DriveWorks. If I click on one of these models, I get a list of all the different captured items associated with that. So right now I've got the top level assembly selected, and these are all the dimensions and custom properties or features that I've chosen to try and automate. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go double click on the height dimension. And this is going to bring up a rule that we're going to go ahead and fill out here. So if I want to go in and take the value from that slider and I want to transfer it over to the dimension in my model, it's actually very, very simple. I don't have to worry about any of the crazy things associated with, let's say, a C# program. Things like namespace, methods, libraries, you name it. I don't have to worry about any of that. All I've got to worry about is this very important kind of detailed information that I'm familiar with. So in order to pass the value from my slider into my dimension, I'm going to go over here to the right-hand side of this DriveWorks Rule Builder where you see the Controls tab, and this is a list of all the different form controls. If I scroll to the bottom, I'll see those sliders here. Slider height. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double-click on the control that I want to reference. So if I double click on slider height, it automatically puts the syntax into the rule builder that says slider height return, and all that means is it's going to pass the value from the slider directly into that dimension. And I can actually see that here on the values tab because it shows me the result of this rule is 950. So it's going to take the 950 millimeter value and it's going to pass it right into that dimension and build a cupboard that's the exact height that the slider specified. So that's a really simple example of just how easy it is to write rules in DriveWorks. Now, not all the rules are going to be that simple. We can do a lot more complex things. Another cool example, something that we see often, would be something like a logic statement. So let's talk about shelf quantity. If I go back and I show you real quick that example that we were running earlier, and if I change this door style to glass, what we'll be able to see is that as I vary these height dimensions, notice that when it gets a little bit shorter, we go from 3 shelves down to 2. And it seems to happen as we cross that 900 millimeter threshold. Anything over 900, we get essentially 3 shelves, or kind of a bottom floor and then 2 shelves above it. And then we reduce our shelf count by 1 as we get below that 900 millimeter threshold. So how would we write a rule to accomplish that? Well, inside of model rules, I'm going to go find that shelf quantity dimension that I selected earlier, and I'm going to write a rule to determine whether or not we need to have 1 shelf or 2 shelves. The way that you would do this is with an if statement. Now, you may have used if statements in other applications, even something like Microsoft Excel. But if you're not familiar with an if statement, DriveWorks actually makes it really easy to write out the correct syntax. If I go to this functions dropdown, you'll see that there is an if function that I can select. And this particular function actually has a handy little wizard that will help me create the proper syntax. And what it's asking for first is the condition that I want to evaluate, right? What is the determining factor when we're trying to decide if we need 1 shelf or 2 shelves? Well, really, that's going to be the height of our cupboard. So I'm going to go and select that height slider again. And essentially what's going to happen here is I'm going to say that if we're over 900 millimeters, we need 2 shelves. And if we're under, we need 1 shelf. So I'm trying to decide if my slider for height is greater than 900, right? Once I've determined what that condition is, now I've got to determine the outcome. What happens if it's over 900? What happens if it's under 900? So for my true statement, or my true condition, what I'm going to say is if it's over 900, give me 2 shelves. If it's under 900, give me 1, right? I'm just typing in the result, and once I'm done, I'll hit finish, and you'll see that it actually builds out that syntax for me. So the wizard is really handy for kind of learning some of these functions. If you're not familiar with an if statement, that's a great way to kind of learn and quickly get up to speed. I'll also say that DriveWorks has some amazing help files. If I jump over here to the help file for the if statement, they've got all sorts of cool examples that kind of show me exactly how this function and a lot of other functions work. Don't worry if you accidentally get something wrong. One of the cool things that DriveWorks also does is it gives you a lot of feedback. So notice that I deleted that last parenthesis, and it quickly turned the background of my rule builder red, showing me that my syntax is currently invalid. If I add it back, we're right back to green. Okay, so there's a lot of really cool options there for the rule builder, and it's not nearly as intimidating as trying to write a custom application in a traditional programming language. They've really taken all of the kind of guesswork and tedious work out of it, and they've kind of left you with the things that you're very familiar with, right? How your models work, what values are important, and what value should be driven down into your dimensions and features. So the rules engine in DriveWorks is incredibly powerful. Okay, I can't say enough about that. It's such a cool tool. It's so easy to actually develop all of these, these rules and really automate your designs. There's a lot more that DriveWorks does that makes this whole process a lot easier. You saw a little bit of the form designer when we put those sliders on there. Like I mentioned, there's about 4 or 5 other items that are really, really neat. If you want to check these out for yourself, one of the things that I always recommend is to check out DriveWorksLive.com. If you go to DriveWorksLive.com, not only do they have several examples that you'll see for different projects that you can actually play around with, like that cupboard example, but at the very bottom, they have what are called DriveWorks technology stacks. And these are DriveWorks projects that actually explain the different pieces of functionality that make DriveWorks so special. So there's an example that walks you through how all the different rules operate, how forms are built, what the workflows look like, how to integrate with your CRM or ERP or other databases within your organization. So a really cool way to go and explore all of the key pieces of technology. I wish we had more time to dive into all of them, but today I just really wanted to focus on the rules, and then we can always chat with you guys later about some of these other items, or you can explore them on your own when you get a chance through driveworkslive.com. All right, so we've taken a look at some of the powerful rules-based functionality in DriveWorks, and automation is essentially critical in today's environment. It helps you gain a competitive advantage over your different competitors that might not offer custom solutions. It can help you quickly respond to sales inquiries and quote some of these products. It can help reduce the cost of these designs and honestly even enhance your product quality. It can reduce some of those mistakes that we just inevitably make. And that can always cut down on kind of the costs associated with those mistakes out on the shop floor. So with that in mind, the next question is always, where do we even start? Automation, even when it's simplified, is still a somewhat complex process. There's a lot of variables to take into account, and it may not be something that you've ever explored before or tried to attempt. So I'd like to offer a couple of next steps to you guys. And the first one we talked about earlier, that's just go check out DriveWorks Live, explore some of the different possibilities, explore the rule builder, the form builder, workflows, integration, just some of those cool projects to get an idea of what DriveWorks can accomplish. You can also try out DriveWorks Express. If you have SolidWorks, you actually already own DriveWorks Express. It's free. It's included in every single seat of SolidWorks. So you already own this tool. You can jump in it. You can try it out. You can contact me. I'd be happy to help walk you through an example in DriveWorks Express and maybe help you set up your own project. And of course, you can always reach out to myself or your local MLC CAD Systems office. We can always help you guys roadmap your path to automation or even provide turnkey solutions. So if you say, you know what, we love the idea, we just don't have the manpower, or it's just not a good time for us to take this on our own, but we've got, some needs that we want you guys to take care of and we're willing to pay for it, we'd be happy to sit down and develop a turnkey solution that we just hand over to you guys. But if you're looking to take this on, I'm happy to talk through it with you guys. I'd love to come out or jump on a web session and kind of talk shop, learn about your processes, learn about what's currently challenging your organization, and see if we can find you a solution. It may be DriveWorks. It may be another product, right? May even be a product that MLC CAD Systems doesn't offer. Maybe it's, through another provider. Our goal is to help inform you guys, help you find a solution and make those best decisions. Because ultimately we want to see our partners succeed, and we're happy to help you guys do that. So thanks again for tuning in. Feel free to reach out. Let us know if you have any questions, and I hope to talk to you guys soon.